ladies and gentlemen, on the line, I have Kenny Brydon. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Thank you for all that you're doing there, and how you doing today yourself?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm really looking forward to introducing my audience to you. So let's take it all the way back. Tell everybody where you grew up.
Well, I grew up part of my life in Washington State. My family was from up there, but by the time I was 5 years old, I was living down in Southern California, Oxnard, California. And I kind of was raised there into my teens, and eventually started to getting into a fair share of trouble, and that started bouncing back and forth from my mom down there in Oxnard to Washington State.
Okay. Tell everybody what your upbringing was like.
Well, I lived in a family that drank, and I drank myself. When I started to drink like an alcoholic, and the thing was is that I didn't necessarily fit into the world around me very well. I kind of felt like uncomfortable, at war with the world, and just the way things unfolded in my life. The abuse that I received as a small kid kind of pushed me away from trusting individuals, and eventually I put myself in a place where the solution to everything that I wanted was another drink, and that only brought me more and more trouble as I started to drink to solve the problems, and only made the problems worse, and round and around it went, and so that was what my teen years was, and it turned me towards criminal behavior. I was doing some pretty crazy stuff as a kid. By the time I was 14 years old, I was breaking into cars and homes, and and doing burglaries and stuff like that. And me and a friend, we stole a car from Oxnard and drove it down to San Diego, where we broke into his grandfather's house, and we stole an arsenal of weapons from him. And that put an all-points bulletin on us, armed and dangerous. They didn't catch us in a car, but eventually when we got caught, they put me in juvenile hall. And that started my journey in and out of the juvenile hall detention system. And so first of all, they started putting me into boys camp. And the problem with boys camp is that they didn't have a fence around it. And if it didn't have a fence, I wasn't going to stay. And I started to walk away from that. And by the time I kept on, they'd catch me, send me back to the camp. I'd run away again. And after I turned 17 in the middle of all that, they finally decided, well, okay, whatever, we're just going to get rid of you. And they sent me up to Washington State to live with my father. Living up there with him was kind of like, for a kid who thought the world was nothing but a party, was quite the event, because, he was a partier, and we started to, get high together, and then, kind of like do this crazy stuff. But he quickly realizes that his idea of having a party and mine were not the same. When I started to drink, I was very insane. I was very crazy. And, I just acted in some very, inappropriate and improper ways. And, finally he got to the point where he said, don't come around me if you're going to be drinking. And, so I started, choosing other places. But by the time I was 19 years old, I had, my father had kicked me out of the house. I had wound up out on the streets, and I was hitchhiking up and down the west coast of California, from Washington State all the way down to Texas, actually. And, and I was living off the good graces of other people, sleeping under bridges, and most of the time, I wound up drunk every night. But I didn't, as a result of that, that kind of lifestyle, I had isolated myself from the rest of the world. And I didn't think anybody cared about me. I didn't think anybody really cared if I lived or died. And so I just walked through this world without any kind of belief that there was any value for me in this place, in this world around me. And after taking somebody's life at the age of 19 years old, I stood on a freeway overpass looking over the side. And I was trying to decide whether I wanted to jump or not. And I was talking to this God that I, didn't really understand, but asking trying to just get some kind of a meaning out of my life. And the best thing that I ever, the decision that I came to was that I decided to walk off that bridge, go down and call the police, and turn myself in for a crime that I wouldn't have been caught for.
Wow. What do you think made you come to that decision?
Well, I have a belief in a God of my, I'm a Christian, and I have a belief that God was kind of in a way, very gentle way, was nudging me in that direction. I went came into the California prison system, turned 20 while I was in the county jail, and they put me in the prison system for serving a life sentence. I was doing pretty good on some levels. I was, got my GED within the first couple months that I was incarcerated, and I was studying electronics, and I was pretty sharp on that. I was fixing TVs when they had vacuum tubes in them, and some of your listeners are probably not knowing what those are, but I was doing good, but I was also still using other things, and I was smoking a lot of weed, and because the thing was going on in my head was that I had this insanity going on. I'm in a 12-step program, and we talk about this thing. It's like this idea that we see the world, and as I said earlier, through this kind of an adversarial thing. It's like I'm at odds with them, people around me, either they were better than me or they were worse than me. There was nobody that I felt like that was an equal or anything like that. And I had this idea in my head that I was useless and worthless and I deserved to die. The only thing that really kind of kept that at bay was me using other substances. And I hadn't drank, while I was, when I was in prison, but I was using other things. And the first time that I did get a chance to drink, this God of my understanding kind of gave me a tap on the shoulder and said, "You do that, you're going to probably wind up dead in here." And, I still was using this stuff until such time as I got into this 12-step program. And I found out that, there was a way of dealing with this, my life in a way that, gave me the tools I needed through the 12 steps to live my life in a positive and meaningful and constructive way. And those 12 steps gave me the ability to feel at ease with myself and feel comfortable in my own skin.
That's a very honorable thing that you did, admitting to a crime that you probably, like you said, would not have been caught for. Did you?
No, the prosecuting attorney came to was going to my parole board hearings after about 7 years in, and he was saying exactly the same thing. So,
and you ended up doing 39 years. Did the judge or any of the courts show you any, I guess the word leniency is what I'm looking for coming forward?
Well, the reality was that, I came up in front of the parole board, I think, at 13 years of incarceration. And the DA, who I was just mentioning, the prosecuting attorney in this case, and this is the guy who said that I should never get out of prison from some of the articles that, some of the news reports that I read that he spoke at. But by the time I'd gotten in front of the parole board that, about 4 or 5 times, I cleaned up my life very significantly. And so when I went in front of him, even though I saw the world around me, and a lot of what's going on, what happens with lifers inside of the California prison system was there's a lot of politics involved. And but I didn't think I was going to get anything. But when it came for the DA to, this attorney to speak, and make his case, his words were that I had done the best performance I ever seen, and I deserved to get, and he deserved to get out of prison. And, so that was, quite shocking. And I figured, well, I'm getting out. And I thought that, I had done all the right things. I had walked the walk and talked the talk. And, as they say, I've been a model prisoner and all those things. And, so, I figured I was just on my path to a life outside of prison after about 14 years of incarceration. And a couple months later, I get called back in, and they said that release date that you got is no longer there. And I knew I would spend a long time in prison as a result of that. So, he wanted me out, and he was coming into those hearings for a long time, telling the parole board that I should get out. But the politics of that time and era, really it wasn't just me alone. I was not, singled out and said, okay, you don't deserve this, but we're going to let everybody else go. It was about, there was this no parole policy for lifers in a very complete way. And whether that's a good or a bad thing, and was it so-called fair or not? It's not the point. It's just the reality of where I was at.
Yeah. Now, tell us how you felt the day you were sentenced. What were your thoughts when you realized you would be spending 39 years behind bars? Or, initially you thought 14, but tell us about when that judge hit that gavel.
Well, it was heavy, and it was like, you're the best way I could put it is I was in a state of shock. That's just, and anybody put in that position ought to be, if they don't care, they're definitely just lacking in any comprehension of what it meant. And, and I was in shock, and I was dumbfounded by the whole thing. But, I realized that this is where it was at, and I was going to do my best to make it different. And, I started to knuckle under and started to do the things that I knew I needed to do to get myself, out of prison to the best of my ability. And, I had my issues. I had my substance abuse problems and my alcoholism and everything else that I was dealing with. And I spent a long time doing a lot of therapy and treatment and stuff like that. So, the feelings, were just that. And, and the same thing that happened when I went and, and was told that the parole board I was not going to get out when after about 13 years. It was just this total feeling of my life is just devastated. And it was, but, if I had choices to make at those points in time, and if I could either bury myself further, the phrase that comes to mind with a lot of people that I did a lot of time with is that I don't usually cuss much, but they say fuck it, I don't care. And that mindset and that mentality, I saw it destroy a lot of people that I knew, some of them very good friends.
Wow. So, where were you initially locked up?
My first couple, I first went to, they sent me to Chino to be processed, and then I was transferred up to California Medical Facility up in Vacaville, California. And, and then, they were considerate of the fact that, I had, they gave me some breaks in some ways. And then one of the things is the fact that I had turned myself in and everything. They sent me to a place where I could get quote help if I wanted it, and I chose to do it. And, so they gave me a place that was not on the tough and rough type side of prison incarceration. And I learned to start slowly to live my life, in an incarcerated environment, and the thing that, the restraints that it put on my life kind of gave me some barriers between my own craziness and the world around me. And as I learned, and as I did therapy, and as I did self-help, and I did all these other things, and I worked these 12 steps that I knew and everything like that, I found myself living a life that was, respectful and considerate. It had integrity to it, and I was somebody that could be trusted again and everything like that. And, I found that I was living a comfortable life in spite of the fact that it was in a very difficult place.
This is the part that I want the kids out there to pay especially close attention to. But can you tell us about some of the worst things about your experience in prison?
Well, isolation from everybody I loved. The simple fact is that, I lost out on so many times and places where I could have been with my family. My brother was murdered while I was incarcerated. I watched my mom drink herself to death. All of my family, many of them are now dead. And I watched them all pass away from behind bars. I live in an environment that was very bitter, very hate-filled. A lot of and it was like there was this mindset that people had to have a reason to hate somebody else, and it was like there was this constant lack of respect for another human being, lack of respect for anybody's rights or anything like that, and there was nothing about that situation there that was something that I would have my own volition now definitely would never be willing to go back to. And whether a person was spending 6 months in prison or 30 years, it sucks. It sucks bad. And there's not a lot about it that, I would say is of any nature that is good for us. But the reality is that, according to the world around us, if you break the law, you need to, they need to deal with you. And, I don't think it's a good idea to do anything that puts you in prison.
Yeah. I know we all like to say things like, I have no regrets, I wouldn't do anything differently. But looking back, hindsight obviously being 2020, would you have made the same decision to turn yourself in and spend all those years? Or would you have went on with your life and hope that your God would forgive you?
Well, I don't know. Do I think I would have changed of my own if I hadn't taken responsibility? I'm not too sure about that. In my own situation there, the reality is that I don't have to make that decision about that. In the program that I'm a part of in the 12-step work is that we don't regret the past, but would I like to see it differently? I don't know if I'd want to go to prison, but that's kind of looking at it from the point of what I know now. And I wouldn't need to go through that stuff in order to get to a place where I was doing what I'm doing now. And, going back, getting in a time machine and talking to my younger self and whether that would have made any difference or not, I don't think it would have, because I was just that insane of a person. And I had to, I had to get broken in some very difficult ways. But not everybody needs that. Not everybody has to get to that place. I've seen a lot of guys come in prison for a short time. They realize that this is not a good place to be. This is not a happy place to be. Unfortunately, I've seen other ones think that this is a sign of being a man, and no, it's not. There's nothing about that makes a person even an adult, a responsible adult. And that to me is what really being a man is about: is being of character, being of integrity, and walking in a way that you are contributing to the world around you rather than destroying it.
Amen to that, man. Amen to that. You mentioned the bridge earlier and contemplated taking your life, but at one point behind bars, you also considered taking your own life. Can you talk to us about what was going on mentally with you at that time and give us an idea of what you were feeling?
Well, I'd been sober for probably, over 25 years at that point. I'd been married for a long time, but it didn't look like that I was ever going to get out of prison. And they were not, things are still very, very bleak on that level. And, and I just made this, I had to stop and think about it. I said, do I really want to spend, decades more doing this, or do I want to end my life and get it, and be done with all this? And, and the reality is that, anybody in my position, and they don't really think about it, I think that they're lying to themselves, because it's a dark place to be. But, looking over that edge, I saw that, okay, it sucks in here, but, I'll give this world another try. I'll give this effort. I'll make another effort out of it, because I didn't go and just say, fuck everything, and I'm just going to go crazy on people. I just decided I didn't want to be a part of this anymore. And so when I decided I'd get back involved in the world around me, I'd become a good writer by that time. And people had, I got approached by the warden of San Quentin to become the editor-in-chief of the San Quentin newspaper. And after looking at that, and after considering that side as I did, I went through some even more difficult things that were physical, my health and stuff like that. And I've never really given that kind of an idea of wanting to take my life since then. But I got out of myself, and I got back into being of help to other people, and I started writing for the San Quentin newspaper.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Let's talk about your transformation to San Quentin. You mentioned you were up north in CM. I'm sorry, you said CM. Where did you say again?
CMS.
Yes, yeah, okay. And how did you get transferred over to San Quentin?
Well, they sent me over there because they wanted to send me over there for an evaluation and stuff. And San Quentin has started going through a change. They had, when I first came to prison, there was only 13 prisons, so there wasn't a lot of options on where they would send people. And San Quentin, when I first came to prison, was a very violent place, and it was a lot of killing going on there, and a lot of violence and stuff like that. But they built up a bunch of other prisons, one in particular up in Pelican Bay, up in far north of California, and they started sending a lot of those people that wanted to act that way and behave that way to that prison. And so I got to San Quentin in 1993, and they had changed it in. It's like they had changed it into this institution that was, they had designated level 1 to a level 4 prison system at that point. And San Quentin, when I got there, was at a level 2 prison. And it wasn't as violent as it was back then. The people that had behaved that way, they had sent off to other institutions, and they had put them in lockup units and stuff. And so I started my life there in 1993. And that's eventually where I paroled from, and over 23 years later. So and it was a different environment. I mean, sure, there was violence there, and there was people that got hurt, and people got in fights and stabbings and everything else, but nothing like it was before. And the reality was, and I can say this for anybody who's real, thinking that if you go to prison, you got to be a part of gangs and stuff like that. No, you don't. There's the way I chose to live my life. If I wanted to get involved in gangs, I could have. But the reality is that I said, no, I'm not going to be a part of that. And they may be a little intimidating at first, but the reality is that, the pressures that they put on me, I said, no, I don't want to be a part of it. And they quickly moved on to find somebody who was more more willing to do what they wanted them to do. And so, being there and doing what I was doing, I kept to myself on that level. What I learned as far as life in prison is I stuck with winners. And there's plenty of people in the prison system, still are, who are doing the right thing. They're walking a walk that is, as they want to call it, and whatever that means is that, they're squares. And that means is that they ain't breaking the rules. They ain't breaking the laws. They're not trying to be a gangster. They're trying to be somebody who's ready to get out of prison and live a life that is responsible.
I don't want you to take disrespect to these next couple of questions, but are you a white guy? Would you consider white, Caucasian?
I am white.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, cool. So
yeah, I'm Caucasian. Okay.
Okay, and I'm asking that because I've never.
I know.
Yeah, I've never interviewed a white gentleman who's about his prison experience. It's always been Latinos and blacks. But can you tell us what it was like for my audience, for myself, what it was like for a white guy doing time in San Quentin?
Well, by the time I got to San Quentin in '93, I'd been in prison system for almost 20 years at that point, and I've learned to walk my own walk and do my own life inside of there. So I would do things that a lot of guys, necessarily who are my race, that wouldn't do. And I was one of those things. I'd go to the black tables. They designated themselves and made choices, and I'd go eat with my black friends on occasions, and I'd be walking down on the lower yard with my black friends and stuff like that. And some of the whites would give me some funny looks, and some of the blacks would give those guys funny looks. But what it was like was that. There was racism, no question about it. But the reality was that, as I said before, if I chose to live my life on a certain path in a certain way, and when it got clear to these individuals that I wasn't going to bend for them, I wasn't going to be of their caliber, and I wasn't going to walk by their principles, they left me alone. And they did it, but they decided that I just didn't fit into their category, and so they just ignored me, so to speak. And I met guys from every race, and the same thing happened with them.
Okay, tell us your Charles Manson story.
Well, I knew Charlie back in CMF when I first got into prison. He was there doing time with me, and they talk about him and some like he was this guru or something like that. But and I'm in conversations with him. I listened to what he had to say, and it's kind of like if you listen to him in a very, very superficial way, it was like, wow, that was profound. But when I listened and I thought about what he said, I said, no, that's stupid. And and he had people that were impressed by him even while he was in prison. But for the most part, he would just kind of like this this infamous guy who everybody knew about and everybody heard about, and I really didn't, he wasn't a friend, but he wasn't anything to me other than just somebody who was walking in the doing time in the same area that I was, and I met a number of those very, very well known and notorious kind of killers and stuff like that were at CMF when I was there too. One of the persons that they had coined a serial killer about, and did a documentary on, Ed Kemper. He was a pretty good Uno partner, and played a good game there. But there was a lot about him that it's just like he loved to talk about killing people, and it was just his joy of life, so to speak. They for the most part, they were just kind of like these sideline things about prison life. Later on, Charlie got himself into some wrecks there at the prison and tried to escape. He got himself burned up by another person. Some other cult guy threw gasoline on him, or some paint thinner it was, and burnt, lit him on fire. But he lived a pretty miserable life on some levels there. I can tell you that.
Was someone like him, because he's obviously infamous for his role in the Sharon Tate situation where he led a group of people to commit acts, was he someone who would just be walking around the yard, walking around freely like you would be, or did they have him separate?
At first he was. He was in just a regular general population, but after he got himself assaulted and some of his other shenanigans, they locked him up. But I knew some of the other Manson family too. I did time with a couple of them down in San Luis Obispo at CMC, Tex Watson and Bruce Davis, and they were on a different page altogether. They had decided to walk away from all that. They had denounced what had happened and everything like that. And and they were pretty straightforward people, and they carried themselves responsibly and were very nice people to be around and everything like that. And not everybody that was a part of that, kept on holding on to that idea about life.
Okay. There's a couple of famous, and I put famous in quotes, obviously, inmates who spent time at San Quentin. I would love to know, Stanley Tookie Williams, co-founder of the Crips gang, he was his life was taken by lethal injection at San Quentin prison, where he spent 25 years of his life. Do you happen to remember that specific time? I'm just curious. And did you know anything about that situation?
I was at the prison the day, I was doing time there when he was executed. And, unfortunately, Tookie was in a spot where, the society and politics and everything like that were trying to push everybody, push this idea that, killing somebody is what we ought to be doing with people. And, I'm of the opinion, because I took somebody's life, I says, well, I deserve to die for what I did. But the reality is that I also think that, before they start going around killing people, that, they should prosecute and kill, somebody who is a millionaire. And because, it almost invariably, the people that get wind up on death row, if not every one of them, they didn't have money. They didn't have money for people to, and pay for their, for attorneys that would, keep, make sure that their rights were not being violated. So, the idea that somebody should be killed for what they did, that's the thing. And then Tookie was, purportedly he didn't do what they said he did in the first place. But I did not know him directly. I think I've seen him walk in being escorted by staff, because the death row inmates were under close security and everything like that. And surprisingly, they're now transferring those guys to prisons, and they're letting them walk a main line and stuff like that nowadays. But back when Tookie was there, he was in the maximum security area, and I was not privy to that kind of area, or I wasn't going to be there. So I just hear the stories and stuff like that. And, I was hearing stories about that, if they killed him, that, prison guards and or police out on the streets were going to be killed and everything like that. And so they locked us down, and I think we stayed locked down for about 3-4 days as a result of that. And, but it came and went. And I remember, what was his name? Reverend Jesse Jackson, he came to see him, and a couple of other celebrities came to see him at that time. I think Snoop Dogg actually came to see him as well.
Yeah.
And, I was hearing the stories, and I was kind of like watching that stuff unfold.
Okay. Now, another person who spent time there, and I believe you went in a little bit before your time, but I'm wondering if you know anything or remember any stories about Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker.
Oh yeah, I've seen him. I've seen him walking in the prison, or not walking in, being escorted. And he was again, just like Tookie, he was in high security, and he had never. Anytime he was walking around there, just like Richard Allen Davis, the same thing. They were, being escorted around, and you know, uh, he was Richard Ramirez was, kind of like he was a spooky looking guy. And they walked him through the visiting room when I was out there a couple of times. But he, they had him isolated from us for the most part, and they just kind of lived in their own world, so to speak.
Gotcha. Now, talk to us about what led to. Hold on one second. Sorry. Talk to us again about the San Quentin newspaper. Some of your times that you spent there, how you got the job, some of the stories you guys wrote, how the inmates felt about it. Can you go a little bit deeper into that?
I was a clerk at the time, and I was doing a lot of report writing and stuff like that. And so, and then I started to write. I was writing my own stories as well at that time and place. I'd written a full length novel, and I'd sent it out for publication, and it got recognized. I mean, I came to very within an inch of getting published, and I started to get compliments on on my personal writing and stuff like that, and and I knew how to handle myself. And so they wanted somebody who was going to represent the paper without being pressured, making it into something that only talks about everything. The gripes that guys in prison would have versus what's really going on there. Information about what to do with their lives. How to get themselves in the right spots and stuff like that. And so, they trusted me. And so they asked me to be involved in the paper and get it going in the right direction. And that was a challenge because, the guys the inmates didn't believe that there was going to be a valid paper, and the staff did not want a paper at all. And so we had to do a balancing act between the two. And, some of the first things that happened was we wrote, so we published a few articles about what was going on in the hole, or ad seg as it's called, and about the conditions there, and they were terrible. And so we started pointing it out there and putting it out there in a way that we showed the guys that. We're gonna tell the stories, but and also we were telling the stories about what's good going on in the prison system. What kind of opportunities they might be able to get in there and everything like that. And it was a good thing. We got blowback from just about every direction, and that was okay too. It was kind of not surprising that that happened, and but it was fun to be a part of that. And the paper went on, it blew up. It became very well known. And it's gotten honors from every different direction. You can find the San Quentin newspaper on the internet now. Every edition of the paper that has ever been printed is available on the internet right now, and you can go over there and you can look at the history of it all the way through from when we started it back in 2006. It was all the way up to current.
That's pretty impressive. What's also impressive is your novel. What led to you writing your book, The Distance Between Right and Wrong: Prison Short Stories?
Well, I love to write. I'll put it that way. And the thing the experience that I've gotten with writing, and it's a quote. I don't know who originated it, but the quote is that writing untangles my thoughts. And there's something about it. There's a gift, in, at least for me, in that if I, putting my own thoughts on paper, made for a very, kind of like clearing my head out of of its own craziness. And I joined this writing class when I was there, and I was a part of it. And the thing was, it was quite amusing, is that everybody in the class except me didn't want to write about prison. They wanted to write about everything else but prison. Okay, well, suit yourself. But I love the thing. The process. I love the experience of it. I love to be able to, tell a story. And when you're telling the story and it's a good story, what they call it is a suspension of disbelief. And that's what, and in a very real way, what you're doing is you're selling the person on a lie. Okay. And I mean, story could be true, but it's the way you say it, it's like, and I wrote fiction, so it was actually, quote, a lie. But, that idea that you can get somebody so engrossed in what the story is about that they forget about that it's just a story. And and there are writers out there, there's movies out there, and everything else that I'm sure that everybody has experienced that at one time or another, where they're so compelled by what's being told to them that it just everything else around them just disappears. And that's one of the things that I love to do in that process. Mm. So when I first wrote that first novel, and I'd never done anything like this before, and I sent it in, and I almost got published. I said, well, maybe I got something here. And one of the other things that it gave me was it gave me a way to express myself that reached outside of the bars. And I was able to talk about life inside of prison to people who had never experienced any of that. And there was a particular writing contest that's called Pen America. And they have a national prison writing contest. It's an annual event where they, you can submit your stories to them for publication, for recognition. And I got an honorary mention at one point, and then also another recognition of a third place statement in their fiction categories. And then the other thing that happened was that we had this world-renowned author come in. Well, actually, I've met a number of very famous authors while I was there. San Quentin had a way of pulling people in. But the one in particular was Joyce Carolose. And she was actually a prison, she's written some prison stories herself, even though she didn't do time. And I've read them, and they're quite good. So she was very impressed with my writing, and she decided to put together a collection of prison stories from across the nation. And it was only one story per prison. It had to be fiction. It had to evolve around, violating the rules in prison and everything like that. And so I submitted one of my stories, and she published that one. And I got the story from San Quentin, and the name of that book is called Prison Noir. But after I'd written all these stories, and many of them got published, including one in particular that I had written about my experience. And this was a memoir piece, and it was about my father coming to see me after my brother was murdered, and and his intent and everything like that. My father was a Green Beret and a very, very, very mean individual, to say the least. And after my brother's murder, he came to visit me at San Quentin. And I remember talking to him about it and saying, and kind of trying to talk him out, or trying to do what I know he was planning on doing. And so I included that story, and it had been published in a number of places. But the rest of them were fiction pieces, and they won awards, and they got published in a number of places. So I hadn't done anything till I got out. And, the person, my partner, she was, kind of poking me about, doing something with all the writing that happened. And she's an English teacher. So, she wasn't sitting well with the idea that I hadn't done anything with my writing since I got out of prison. So I put a collection of these stories together, and I put them on Amazon. And the name of this book is the anthology is The Distance Between Right and Wrong and Prison Short Stories.
Can people still purchase your work? And if so,
Yes.
please tell them where they can find it.
Well, they can find my website. It's The Distance Between Right and Wrong on .com, and it's on there. And if you want to just look at one of the stories, it's available for you to read. You just click on this one button. And the book itself is on Amazon. It's available for sale. And I was just looking over how many books I sold just today, the other day, and I got 4 sales. So I'm kind of happy about that.
Awesome.
And, I love the process. I'm working on and editing out my full length novel that I wrote. And this story is about a guy who goes to prison at the age of 16, serving a life without possibility of parole, and his journey through the prison system. And so I'm getting that edited right now, and pretty soon I'm going to get that out on the website too. So
I love it.
Loving life.
Yeah, that's good.
Life is good out here.
Man. Yeah. I know you got to see your Seahawks win a couple weeks ago in person,
Yeah.
huh?
Oh, that was great. Yes. It's like, that's an interesting part. When we talk about black and white, my best man at my wedding, is a former BGF member, gang member in the prison system, and he's black. And, he found a 12-step program like I did, and we were both clean and sober. I met him while I was outside. For the first couple of weeks I was out, I was asked to share at an event, and he comes walking by, sees my Seahawk hat, and grabs it off the table and throws it in the trash. I said, "Oh, we're going to get along. We're going to get along good." And he was, of course, he was a diehard 49er fan, and but this gentleman, we got to running into each other a lot, and I get a message from him. He says, "I got season tickets to the 49ers," and he's very wealthy. Yeah, he's very wealthy, and he says, "You want to go to the Seahawk game?" I says, "Well, I'm wearing my hat." And he says, "I wouldn't have it any other way." And I have not missed a 49er Seahawk game since I've been out. And, so that's great. And I have a great friendship with this guy. I'll tell you about my job. It's, what I do for a living right now.
Really cool. Tell everybody what you do for a living.
Yeah. Well, it's been a heck of a week. Arnold interviewed me earlier this week, but it had so much noise because I was driving. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry about that. But
no problem.
After 39 years in prison, there was this nonprofit. It's called Bonafide. The guy who started it, he picked me up at the gate when I paroled back in 2017. He gives me a cell phone. He takes me to breakfast. He started, and he started helping me to get my life together when I got out there. And so a couple of years ago, I went to work for him, and that's my job. Is I pick guys up, I welcome them out of prison. Just this last week, I picked up 4 different guys. Several of them spent over 30 years incarcerated, and I get to come bring them out of prison, and say to them, "You can live a life out here that is decent. It's responsible. You can do things out here. You can have a good life." And so I welcome them out in a very clear way that gives them the belief that they can walk out here and do the right thing too. And and it's a great opportunity to be of service myself. It reminds me and it humbles me about the fact that my life was very different. And let me tell you, when you first walking out of that door after even after 10 years of prison life, and there was a couple of guys that I did that with, it's like, you're a deer in the headlights. This world out here is just crazy. And, it takes a while to adjust, and it takes a while to get things. And so to be able to talk to them, and to be that guy that says, yeah, I was there. I did that. I know what you're going through. It's very, very helpful. So I love that. I love the work. Unfortunately, my engine light is on in my car now, so I've got to go get that thing fixed. But, life is good out here. It really is. And, and I've been back I went in and shared in Soledad a couple months ago, and I've been back to San Quentin and went into with the San Quentin newspaper and talk and experience what's going on in the prison right now. And they're doing some major work at San Quentin to bring rehabilitation there. And I think it's fantastic.
That's great, man. I have one more question for you, and then I'm going to let you go. And I do appreciate this conversation, but I always like to end it on a positive note, specifically for the youngsters out there who think prison is cool, think it's a rite of passage, think it's something that they want to do. Can you give advice to kids out there, what you've been through, so they don't go down the same route? Just give them maybe some words of advice.
Well, if prison was so great a place, why do they need bars? That's the reality of it. But, the things that I learned, one of the things that as a lifer that I had to do in going in front of the parole board is what they called insight. And what that meant was understanding why I was doing the things I was doing, and just then stopping and thinking about just how, crazy when you look at it from an outside viewpoint of the decisions that I made to go, and do the things that I do. There's a better way. There really is. No matter what race you are, no matter where you're at, it's like I met so many people of every race, and certainly, and I knew guys that were all into the hardcore stuff, and gang leaders and everything else that I got to know while I was in there. Not one of them really, was of the point where they said, everything I did, man, I thought it was great. They regretted it, and they regretted it a lot, and they wished they had not done it. And many of those same individuals and those gang members and everything like that, they're now going back into those prisons, and they're telling the people, don't do it. Get your life together, get your life on a positive note, and make something of yourself rather than go down that path, because there's nothing but darkness in that, and it's miserable, and it's bitter, and it destroys families, it destroys relationships. The parents of these individuals, they've suffered a lot as a result of that. So, making the decisions to change your life around at the moment may not seem to be, easy to do, and I heard many of the guys and the youngsters coming in and say, well, you don't know my life. You don't know me. But the reality is that, I know the guys after they've made those changes, unfortunately, after the fact, and they know that, they turned their life around before they got in there. They could have had a good life. They could have a life that is worth living. And that's the bottom line of it. And so I hope that some might think about that and give it a consideration.
Kenny, Brydon, it's really been a pleasure. I do appreciate each and every one of your points that you made, and I do appreciate our conversation. I'm going to post the links in the description for anyone who wants to purchase Kenny's books. I do highly recommend. I'm also going to purchase them myself as soon as we end this conversation, so you'll have 2 more sales there, my brother. But definitely appreciate you, man. And any last words you want to say hi to anyone, send any shout-outs? The floor is yours.
No, I'm just glad to be alive, man. It's like I'm living a great life out here. I love the people that I'm working with, and and I will plug I work for 2 nonprofits nowadays. Okay, so I want you guys to know about them. First one is called Bonafide. They're the ones that picked me up at the gate, but the other one is Anti-Recidivism Coalition, or ARC. And they're both nonprofits. If you throw a few dollars their way, they would be very grateful, and they're very positive, and they're very supportive programs. So I hope you might give them a little bit of a support there. So peace to you all.